Hi, some familiar faces, but a lot of new faces. My name is Kimberly. I previously worked as an RTE within bank and insurance companies, and I'm currently working as a Lean-Agile enterprise coach as SEB. And this is basically just a summary of a little bit around what I wish someone would have told me maybe in the beginning, and some practical, very hands-on practical tips and tricks that I often hear. So as a new RTE starting out, there's a lot of how-to questions, like how do I do this, how to do this, and so on. So we will cover some of these areas. And as a new RTE, the first how-to is how to do a PI planning. So the first question that is on top of everybody's mind is often around PI planning. Even though that's the 2 days out of your whole increment, but it's a big event. And if it's the first PA planning you're doing, it's gonna set the tone for your whole art, the coming increment. So it's quite something huge. And I think I saw something on the board around, there was a tip there around preparations. So I just want to emphasize there's a lot of preparations that goes in before PI planning actually happens. This picture here is a picture before my actual first PI planning ever. And this is the calm before the storm, I like to call this picture. So everything you can see here is neat and tidily prepped in the room. This is pre-corona, as you might have guessed. And if it's during this pandemic or you're doing it digital, everything is prepped in a digital environment. Maybe you have done a run through with your Scrum Masters around the whole process, around what's going to happen at the PI planning event. Because these people are really, they are a part of the whole facilitation team around PI planning. So actually doing this run through of the process, or maybe doing a dry run and having checklists and all these kinds of little artifacts that you need to go into the preparation, it's really going to help you have a smooth PI planning process that helps you focus more on the content and the discussions that needs to happen around what is the outcome that we want from the different items that we're planning and so on. So focus more on the discussions. And one thing, if we jump away from this little PA planning room, let's see if I can click there.
Can I ask a question on the room itself?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've only worked as an RTE during COVID-19 restrictions. So we've always worked with Miro and digital meetings. So I have some questions for these prehistoric non-COVID sessions. How do you compare them to the digital meetings, and what is better and worse? I mean, what are the benefits of working in a big room planning session like this?
I think the main benefit, if I were to just highlight one, I'm a very pro meeting face-to-face and having physical artifacts when learning kind of person. So just, my stance here is the feeling in the room. It's a quite massive event, often arts 50 to 125 people roughly. You create a quite big feeling in the room of actually making an impact. And it's kind of a little bit, the best I can sort of compare it to, if you've been to like some other sort of event, a music festival, for instance, where you feel the beat almost in the room, really. And it's very visual to everybody. So we as human beings are very much, the way we learn is visualizing and touching the items on the wall. So I think the learning is very much higher in a physical room, and it's much more visceral to everybody. So everybody's much more on the same pace. That's why I'm talking about this feeling and the beat and the heartbeat of the room, really. That might sound a little abstract if you only sort of done it in a digital setting, but I think it's possible to create this feeling of togetherness, but it's much, much harder. And a lot of more time spent preparing for the digital setup rather than in the room, even though there is a lot of preparation to the room.
So yeah, okay, but if you don't mind, I have some more questions on this setup here. The templates you have there, they look like big sort of charts, white charts on the iteration risks and PI objectives. Those are you printed them out, or you typed.
Exactly. So it's the team's sort of iterations where they can, this area where you see here, it's the big room where we can like have the morning briefings and everything like that. And when we do the draft and final plans, and behind the glass, you see there's a bunch of smaller rooms and more open spaces as well for the team to put.
Excuse me, isn't it possible that we can take the questions afterwards? Because I guess we all will have questions, and it would be wonderful to hear your story.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
do you mind?
I can show you even more if you like later. Yeah, thank you for the input. Absolutely. But it's all about keeping it visible on the wall. And it's the same sort of templates that you would use now as well, but doing it in a digital setting. I'm jumping ahead based on feedback, so thank you for that. So preparing everyone is really key here. And one speaker that is often forgotten or that you need to book well in advance is the business owners. So actually sort of booking them well in advance and preparing them. And the morning briefings, where we actually have to set the context for the whole PA planning, I really recommend to now, when we're in a digital setting, try to make them interactive using different tools like Kahoot or Menti, to actually gather feedback as they're doing the presentations. One format that often is used is lightning talks, like each speaker gets 10 minutes of talking to the next one. If the morning presentations is a snooze fest, that's going to set the tone for your PA planning. So you really need to try and make it interactive now that we're not gathering physical in the room and getting that feeling. And try to keep it really, what is the core message of each speaker? And just as a good book, a PA planning starts strong with the morning briefings being really creating that feeling and ends strong. So actually making it really clear for everybody at the end of PA planning, so what is going to happen next? So now we've done this amazing plan, we've created this alignment with everybody. But what happens now? Because now we got to go into the actual execution of the plans that we made. So where can I go to gather information? Where can I go to see the progress and the blockers, and where and when is the Scrum of Scrum, for instance, and so on. So really starting strong and ending strong. And then throughout the whole PA planning, in the middle or all the parts of it, start gathering feedback throughout the whole PA planning. So instead of doing the feedback, if you looked at SAFE standard agenda, you have feedback the 30 minutes at the end. My recommendation is do it throughout the whole PA planning. So you can actually act on the small stuff that you get feedback on. I was at an event called Agila Sverige some years ago, and they put up a whiteboard, and anybody who walked past that feedback whiteboard could just write some feedback. And then one of the event's sort of organizers could walk by it as well and just answer on that feedback on that board. So also making the feedback board interactive as well. So if they want different fika day 2, give them different fika day 2. See? I'm not a Zoom expert, sorry. I'm more of a Teams person these days. But if they want different fika day 2, give them different fika. It's a small change that you might think doesn't mean anything, but by acting on the small stuff, you're going to learn the whole sort of organization of people that when I give feedback, it's acted upon. So I'm going to be more inclined to actually bring forward those tough feedbacks that I might be sitting on. And those are really the gems of it. On this picture here to the left, you can see as well sort of the first picture on the second slide there, the whole program board. This was the result of that program board, the first PA planning. And what also happened with this program board was that the CEO of the company walked by and looked at it and said, "Oh my God, I want to take a scissor and just cut through this." And we said, yeah, that's not going to change reality though. We actually need to work on removing and changing.
Did the connection die?
I think we lost.
Do you hear us still?
Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
now.
maybe missed a little bit there. Let's see. Do you hear me still?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
awesome.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, there were some improvements of the program board over the years, but what may appear to be a simple red string and it's really easy to move on the program board, in reality can mean quite big architecture changes or reorganization of the teams and so on. So there's a lot of actual real good things that can come from a program board besides just the information of who needs to collaborate with who. Yeah. This tip is one of the best tips I got at the beginning as an RTE, I think. And usually I always say, have a party at the end of the first day of PA planning. And then I get the response, but I want to have the party at the end of the second day of PA planning, because then we're partying because we're done and everything like that. But by actually having the party at the first day of PA planning, and of course, if you can have it close to maybe, I think the old times of actually having PA plannings in the room, I think and I hope they're gonna come again, or some sort of mix of it where you can meet at least on the sites you're sitting. But by having the party close to where you also had the PI planning, that enables, or where you gonna have the management review. So when you have the management review and there is some sort of question that has actually popped up, or you need to maybe go grab the PO or of that team to actually solve it together with them, they are maybe close by drinking a beer or something like that. And that sounds maybe far-fetched in this reality we're living right now, but this was something that was possible before, and I think it's gonna be possible again. And also by having the party at the end of day one, and you can do a party digital as well, a lot of times they're gonna continue to bring the problems that they were encountering throughout the day. And when in a more relaxed settings, more and different perspective is gonna come up, and you're probably gonna solve a lot of problems. So you don't need to bring those problems into day two as well. The trade-off here is that sometimes a little bit of a hungover the day two, but I have found that trade-off is so worth it. And then, how do we actually maintain alignment after PI planning? So as I mentioned, as a new RT starting out, it's usually PI planning. But after the PA planning, we need to maintain that alignment that we actually got during the PA planning. So I mentioned, make it clear at the end of PA planning, where can I go to gather information? And actually sort of create the artifacts that you created. And as well, I'm having a lot of visual pictures here and examples, but I have the same sort of examples digitalized. I tried to keep them as similar as possible to how I would have done it in the physical setup. And create those water holes where people can see the current state of the art. So we created a plan at the PA planning. We created, previous to PA planning, which started up a feature Kanban board. We had some risks. We had some Scrum of Scrums. And actually, if it's possible and the team is sitting together, or if they have a common storage surface online, have all those artifacts gathered together. So that's the feature Kanban board, the program board, a visualization of the Scrum of Scrum questions, the risks, and I also recommend a wall of fame. So the items that are actually done, they're not moved to done column. They're moved to the wall of fame. So we can celebrate some mini celebrations. Yeah, thumbs up on that one, good. And if the team or the arts are sitting together, put it by where they're sitting. And I like to put it by the coffee machine. People walk by, grab a coffee, see that something is maybe put up on the Kanban board, the feature Kanban board. You can see a red sticker there for a blocker. Goes up and looks at it. Someone else walks by and they start a conversation about it. So it's very much about creating transparency and creating conversations. This is more difficult to do when we're all distributed. So you really need to try and create that virtual room with the same sort of information where we can actually need to force in that transparency and force in that dialogues a little bit. Let's see. And during, for instance, Scrum of Scrum, it's not about the different items that we planned that we want to continue having that alignment about. It's about the outcome, the PI objectives. So the questions I usually ask during, for instance, a Scrum of Scrum is, do we expect to meet the PI objectives? Do we have any items being blocked? Do we need help? So focus more on the outcome rather than the output in terms of we communicated to our business that this is the effects, the outcome that we wanted to deliver. And then how is that going? And during the PA planning, if I just jump back a little bit, it's really good as well to discuss already at PA planning, what are we going to demo at the end of this increment? So starting sort of a little bit with the end in mind, what effects will we see when this 3 months is over? And then you can keep that discussion going throughout the PI. And if stuff happens that, okay, our test environments are totally crashed, we're not going to be able to make it, then that's what we also communicate back to our stakeholders and our business owners. We talk a lot about more around the outcome rather than the output. And of course, enabling fast feedback loops. And by that, I mean to actually get the demos going and rolling. And sometimes in the beginning, this can be a little bit tricky with some of the teams maybe not used to it, and maybe we don't have the technical prerequisites to actually create that software and develop it under 2 weeks, for instance, and demo something. But just start demoing and start demoing what you got them. So start working with what you have and don't be afraid to sort of maintain that transparency. And here, continue working with these items, the feature Kanban, the program board, the risks, the Scrum of Scrum questions and so on, to actually get the artifacts rolling. So it's not just something you create and then you throw away. And the focus here, I think, should really be the feature Kanban. Get it rolling. And in this little picture, let's see here, you have in the upper left corner, you have a feature Kanban. And for the sharp eye, you can see that there's a lot of items under implementing. And you might question this. This was reality. And then you have some pink, very visible pink stickers that are actually blockers on items. So to actually create the water holes that have the visual indicators of how's it going. How am I going by time, by the way? It's okay, good. And it's not something that's gonna happen overnight. It's not something that is just gonna change because you had one PI planning. Usually you will see that actually if you have prepared everything and maybe you're doing it the first time, the first PA plan is going to go quite well. The second might go quite well as well, because it's new and everybody's intrigued and excited. Usually I see a little bit of a dip around the third or fourth PA planning, because they know the processes, they know the content, and the real questions start to happen. And they start to actually question why stuff is like it is. And here you have the real win to actually, okay, yeah, let's dig into that. Why is it as it is? And it's much easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting. So when those questions come, you have to really be the model for the new behavior that we want to see, or the changes that we want to see. So actually encouraging a lot of dialogue around the questions that is going to come up. And that goes the same for instance, when the Scrum of Scrums happen. So when there's going to be pressure, when it's going to happen not according to the rule book or not according to the structure, the people in the art is going to look towards you to actually see, okay, how will the RTE act now? Will you fall back into the previous behavior, or will you be consistent and model the behavior that you want to see? So if there is a problem, maybe as I mentioned, we're not able to actually reach these PA objectives because the test environment went down. What can we learn from this? How can we help? Rather than, oh, bad team member, we don't like this, and we're going to report you to the business owner. And I think actually that was the last one of it from me. And again, a lot of my pictures were from actually the room, because that was my prehistoric time when I did a lot of PA plannings myself, but everything is digitalized nowadays. But keeping it digitalized and actually using the room for those that can use the room going forward is my big recommendation.
And I thought, Kimberly, actually, many of the things you mentioned around creating waterholes, for example, that's a technique that is equally viable in a digital forum, because
yes.
you need to know, where do I go to have this conversation? Where do I go to find this information? That's basically replicated then instead in team room setups or Miro boards and so on. So the infrastructure and the setup as you presented is as viable there, I think, and as
exactly.
important.
Create a team site for your art, for instance, or have a common SharePoint for your art. So create those kind of waterholes in the digital environment instead.
And also something I really liked that you brought up was the whole celebratory part of working together. So, my experience is that in the beginning, when you're starting to work collaboratively in this way, many challenges immediately are so visible that you want to talk about the challenges all the time. But the problems that you suddenly are seeing, because they've been around but not so visible.
Yes.
But where do you find the energy to address those? Well, by celebrating the good stuff. We actually delivered something, or we actually managed to have this conversation that we never had before. Let's create positive energy around that, right? So you get energy for it. I really like that. It's so easy to get stuck in. We have these problems to fix, and yes, we also did good stuff.
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff we're going to do the first time we're doing this is going to make those problems really transparent. And that's why it can be a good idea to also prepare the leaders, because you know they're going to be transparent. So how should we act when these becomes transparent?
So when we see big hairy problems, how do we act then? That you actually know beforehand, that say nice things and be proactive rather than being upset.
And they're a gift, aren't they? Big hairy problems are gifts in disguises.
I think interesting problems are more interesting than interesting solutions. All right, so we're a little bit ahead of time. Should we take maybe 5 minutes some open questions from the group for Kimberly, and then dive back to the Miro board before taking the next section? Is that okay for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We can dive back into all of these questions about the prehistorical time that I spent. Bumping back to this picture maybe. And I think you can do the exact same thing in a digital environment, and that's what I've been doing as well in the pandemic, and that's what I've been coaching in as well, to actually visualize the iterations. I've seen a lot of good RTEs creating, either being super creative in Excel and everything like that, and recreating these templates. If you have a mirror board, that's awesome. Sadly, our company didn't have a mirror board, so that's why I've seen a lot of creative solutions in Excel. But this was actually just put up on the walls in the room. So imagining a very big Excel on the wall where you could interact.
So, quick question. You said keep it interactive during the PI planning, the morning briefing. How do you do that so you mentioned Kahoot and Mentimeter. What activities do you make with those?
So what I've done, one example, is that I said in advance before the morning briefing started that we're going to have a Kahoot. And if you played Kahoot, it's a bunch of questions that comes and you have to answer them under time pressure. And there will be a prize to the winner. And the questions are around the morning briefings. So you actually have to really put on your big ears and listen in. Because, it was not a fancy prize, to be honest. It was like 2 candy bags or something like that. But people can be really competitive. And some of the questions were just super difficult and fun. But then at least people listen in. I've also done something that was a little bit more harsh, maybe. I had a problem with very boring speakers, to be honest. I did live feedback. So during or after each 10-minute talk, they got to answer a Menti in real time. And when everybody's anonymous, they are honest. So each feedback or each talker got live feedback on how well their speaker or their talk actually sort of created this positive encouragement and this, go get it attitude. And some of it was really honest, but they knew in advance that they would get that feedback. So they had an opportunity to really work on their talking skills before. So that's like 2 examples how I've done it in the morning briefings.
Thank you.
Yeah, that takes some preparation, I'm sure.
Actually, not as much preparation as you would think. I think setting up Mentis was super fast, but you have to prepare the speakers so that they are okay with actually being going through that. And the Kahoot, I just asked each speaker, like, give me 1 question, and then I tweaked them a little bit to make them more funny.
Move. And I also think it might be very useful for the boring speakers to get good feedback. Was it?
Yes, they got to rate them on a scale, and then they also had to sort of answer the question, what would have made it better? So then they also got some good tips. It was not only just a scale, because that would have just closed it very negatively, but they also got the good tips of what would have made this presentation more engaging. More reflections, questions, or maybe how have you made the morning briefings interactive? If you have more tips.
I'm actually raising my hand, but I was wondering, as we are now starting to get back to normal a little bit, I suspect that there might start to be mixed groups in PI planning, some people on site and other people off site. Any thoughts about that? Have you been doing that? Any experiences?
Yeah, actually, when one of the sort of last PI plannings me myself facilitated was just as the pandemic was starting out. I was actually getting messages like just before we were going into the draft plans, like, okay, new regulations, we can't be as many in the room as we were planning to do, we have to mix up and stuff like that. But my best tip when we're starting to get a little bit back to normal is we might not be able to travel if you're located over multiple countries, but if you can meet on the different sites in the different countries, or if you can do that as well in the office building, like gather smaller parts of your art together in different areas, and as an RTE having a sort of single point of contact, or someone that is sort of acting a mini RTE or single point of contact towards you, towards that different site. And Scrum Masters are the go-to people to actually keep that together. So try to gather people in smaller groups than per site. And make sure as well, when you have the Scrum of Scrums and the sync and the check-ins, that everybody sort of is on board. And do a little bit more preparations with the one that's going to be single point of contact, because they are going to be your extended arms out in the rooms. And Scrum Masters are supposed to be that regardless, so it fits really well.
And what about if that's not possible? I do see people out in the organizations that we work with. Some people just plainly refuses to come to the office because they might be in a risk group, or they just believe that they are in a risk group.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they are in a risk group and it's health issues, that is sort of the concern as well. That is really their closest managers. They need to talk with them, and they need to figure that as well. You're going to have those people regardless that maybe are not going to fly in because they're on the other side of the country and you don't have that flight budget. It doesn't need to be the pandemic even. And to make sure that they are included, like for now, having the camera on so you can actually increase the level of communication that happens. Because each element, we're sort of putting technology between ourselves, reduces the level of information, and therefore how good the conversation is, how much information. So just seeing each other through the camera, it's going to make it a lot more. I'm going to receive a lot more information from my communication together with you on that one. And having, if it's possible, like having one main channel where you can always jump in and there's always like connected. So maybe I'm planning together with my team, but then we can always jump into the main channel that is maybe live streaming from the room where people are meeting. So think of it more as a live stream then, and a live interaction. And try to mimic reality as far as possible.
That takes a lot of also setting some rules of what you can do and what you cannot do. I've been doing plenty of instruction. That's why I'm calling myself Instructor Gadget. And I realized that people think they know exactly what to do online, but a lot of people just, shut down the video and whatnot. So I think going through that might be quite important. What do you say? I think it's been very helpful what you've been saying so far.
And if I can add something to the where some of us are remote and some not, I just want to call out, as you said, if you have health risks, take care of that first. No one should take health risks to put up post-its, right?
No,
so stay healthy. The second thing is that I found that hybrids are hard. So 2 of the people in the agile teams are remote, and then 3 are on site. And if you're doing that inside a 5-person agile team, their discussion is going to be extremely disjointed, because you're going to have 3 people sitting around a table and 2 listening in, as you said, through a thin screen.
Yes.
We've actually found sometimes that we asked, could the entire agile team either be in one site or all be remote, to create a sort of, we're all collaborating equal terms to this straw. And that was a bit counterintuitive when the pandemic hit, actually.
Yes.
So,
yeah, we've been experimenting quite a bit with that and had some good success with actually having people stay in their own rooms and using their laptops so that everyone is on equal footing. And that has been working fairly well in smaller groups, but I have a hard time seeing how you're going to get this to work when there's 100 or 200 people.
It's interesting, Peter, that it works so well that you're actually going to make everyone have the same worthless communication forum. Create collaboration. I'm like, why does this work? This is strange. I've observed the same, and just like you, I am a bit worried when we're working with the collaboration at scale here. Of course, the end only solution is to decentralize decision making further, which would mean that the people who are not in the same room have more awareness of what is a business relevant decision where I am. But that requires us to have much more constraints and much clearer guidance on what's a good decision here. Not easy to solve. More decentralization is probably the path, but that requires us to have more clarity in structure and intent. hard one.
Yeah.
Okay, good topics here. We're at time here, so I really wanna. Is it okay if we keep going?
Yeah. Keep going. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I can talk all night about this.
I know. So this is so great, but I really want to go back to the Miro board that you guys created. And there's so much knowledge and experience in the room. So my suggestion here would be that I open up new breakout rooms just for 5 minutes, and then you'll meet 1 or 2 people that you maybe haven't met before. It's new people from last time. And then look at the problems you found when you discussed in the beginning. You brought up maybe the challenge around remote work or around alignment issues and so on. And then maybe ask in the group, did I find a solution in this discussion? Or could you in the room maybe help me find a solution? Maybe you've done something around this that solved it. So
can you give the questions one more time for us who were late? We were a couple.
Sorry?
Can you do the questions, the initial questions again, so we who were late can actually be part of it?
Well, the thing was, I'm asking, what was a practical tool or tip that you had from RTE? And the other one was, what's a big challenge that I've seen? And I'm wondering now, have you found an answer for your challenge? Or maybe you're going to meet someone in a moment who has a suggestion. I encountered that and we did X. And X, you should try X. Maybe. So it's just a way to close this topic, and then I'm gonna start up talk about something that's really boring. It's the
best part. It's the measurement.
Measurements. Ooh, so boring. So we're gonna talk flow metrics 20 minutes after this also, and I'll share some of my practical learnings from measuring or quantifying flow. So 5 minutes, breakout room. Meet some people, discuss, did you find a solution to your challenge or not? And then I'll bring you back in 5 minutes and then we'll start again. So let's see if I can find the button here. Breakout rooms. We're 39 people, so I'll just recreate the rooms. Like that. And then I have started breakout rooms. So you should see the button down here on your screen. You can join breakout room and you should magically be moved to a smaller room with a few other random people that maybe can help you solve your dilemma or your challenge.
Future friends.
Hopefully. Future RTE friends. I'll see you in 5 minutes. And I want to switch gears a little bit and finish tonight with talking about something as boring as metrics. And simply, I want to focus on quantifying the flow of value through the art. We're going to be talking a little bit about lead time, throughput, flow, and trying to understand how you, in your role as an RTE, could maybe take a quantitative aspect as you're working with it. Because just working with the teams and working with the engineers, working with the people, great. But the primary objective of the RTE, the prime directive for the RTE role, is also to manage the flow of value. What does that mean? And how would you see it? It's hard to see. Here's where metrics can be handy. So I want to discuss the idea of this. Understanding the going from a opportunity somewhere to a something that's actually resolved that opportunity. We see a potential for a change in a solution, a new solution in the market, even something smaller, maybe a new feature for the solution we're building. And we want to, in a timely manner, respond and build something that solves that or creates that value. And the RTE manages that flow. These are features. These are things that you're building, that you're identifying, that has to be constructed, that has to be delivered, that has to also be validated in the field. Are they doing the work? And there's 3 perspectives that come into play when I'm talking about metrics here, and I'm going to focus on one specifically today. So the 3 that come out is the competency perspective. Actually, do we have the ability, the skills to work together? This squad health checks, the business agility assessment that Lejonö has created, those are competency checks where we look for skills. And the other one is the outcome part, of course, the things we're building, the flow of value, the value delivered. Does that actually produce the relevant business outcomes? Do we actually change and shift the behavior of the solution in the market in a beneficial way? Those are important. But I'm going to focus on one here tonight, and that's the third one. How do we measure the flow? here's a brilliant place for you to start. All three you might grow. Actually self-assessing against competencies, getting even better with PMs and business owners on defining outcomes and so on. But first and foremost, unless you have a flow system, it's going to be very hard to deliver anything. So I'm going to focus here on possible metrics or quantifiable aspects of this flow that I think you should be working with. Or let's say it like this, that I would be working with. So first, watch out. Any quantitative measurement of anything can't tell a story. So it can only tell you a delta, the change, or it can tell you the state of something. But to understand what you need to do, you need other tools. A measurement stick, like when you're making food, you're cooking salmon and then want to get it to the optimal temperature. As you're putting in the measurement stick into it, you're getting a reading on the temperature. Is it too hot, too cold? Sure, that gives you something, but then what do you do with that information? Now you need to look at the texture, you need to look for the smell and go like, maybe the oven like 5 minutes and then done. So you need other aspects. So the measurements don't tell you what to do, they only tell you that you need to do something. And now you probably, in the RTE role, need to go talk to someone and ask, we're seeing this, what's happening here? So they don't create the solution, they only create the question. Second, only measure in the role of the RTE, or this is general, I would say, where you have decisions that are looking for data. So if you don't know what you're going to have the data for, be careful. Look for, here's a gap between my understanding and where we're hoping to go, and then I need data to close that gap. For example, you're seeing we are not as predictable as we thought we could be. We're not hitting the marks when we're delivering the solutions. There's a gap between here's timelines that we might need to hit and here's where we're not hitting them. Now you need data to understand, why is this happening? Are there cues in the system? What's causing the unwanted delays? So you need data, measure for that. And thirdly, what you measure has an effect. I mean, if you're into quantum mechanics, you know that just observing, as they say, have an effect on the system. The Copenhagen interpretation. Here I'm saying that when you start measuring something and you're discussing that measurement, people will start taking that in when you're talking to them. That might change what they do. Take a very silly example. In systems building, decades ago, we used to even measure lines of code written. Actually, I think Windows 95, I think, or one of the early Windows versions at least, was delivered to market with they were paid, when you've written 50,000 lines of code, you get this payment. When you've written 100,000, you get this payment. What kind of behavior do you think that creates among engineers when you're incentivized to produce volumes of code? You're measuring something as simple as the lines of code written and you're incentivizing that. Well, you get bloated code, of course. So you need to understand what's the effect of this measurement, the behavioral effect. And overall, be careful. These are powerful things to use and they might produce unwanted artifacts unless you're very careful. So as you're introducing a quantitative aspect of the work, think first. What are the effects? How can this be abused? Is this really supporting decisions that we're trying to make? So that's the warning label, okay? So be careful. So how do we measure the flow? And when we're talking about the flow, if you're an RTE, the most simple thing to focus on is the features. The joint slices of value, the increments, how you evolve the solution forward, that you're trying to get from here's an identified opportunity, you've written a feature for it, it's no bigger than a PI, we think it's sort of understandable, let's start exploring this, until the point where it's actually, hey, we've done the work, we've delivered it, it's in the production environment, whatever that means, and it is actually producing value. If you're in the software space, I like the quote, working software is software doing work. It's not only things we've built, it's literally things that are in the hands of the people who needed them and they are useful. So it's done, basically. That is the flow that we're looking for. Cues, We're trying to make it smooth. We're trying to balance it. And to measure that, I would start with these metrics. Here's my go-tos. And here's a little bit of a conundrum. Names are important. Terminology is important because it's sort of the collaboration API. And I'm going to discuss the metrics now from the flow framework perspective. So this is a guy called Mick Kirsten who's created a flow framework, and he's got names for things, the metrics that we're going to use here. And these are actually names that we've decided to implement in the Scale Agile framework also. But I'm going to translate to what others might call them also, so you see the gap here. First, this example, flow time. This is most often called lead time. It's simply the time it takes for something to go from, see if you can see this, from inception to completion. So I'm measuring the timeline it takes for a feature to go from, here's an identified need, the need is resolved. So that is usually, if you're into lean thinking, into most other domains, referenced as lead time. We've chosen though to lean on Mick's framework here, as flow time is a pretty neat word. And the first thing I would do as an RTE, or not the first thing, but one of the first things I would do is look for what flow times do we have for features in the art. If I'm assigned an art, if I'm starting to work with it, I would look at recent features, look at what's not only the average time or the most common time, I would look for median times, and I would also look for the distribution in the data set, because you might have outliers which might skew it. So I would want to understand, is it a homogeneous data set? And also look for what are averages. And if there is no data, I would just look at, is it weeks or months? That would tell me something. To quickly get a baseline on what sort of turning radius do we have, and I would call that flow time. And secondly, I would go for flow velocity. Here I'm referencing again the terminology from the flow framework, and now also adopted by the SAFe framework. This might be called throughput in most other cases. It's simply, over time, how many completion events do we have for features? So I would look in a time box, I would look at the PI boundaries if I'm an RTE. Look, within a PI, how many features do we actually set a gold star on? Actually, they are done. They are valuable things in the field doing work. And I'm looking for that trend. Is it trending upwards or downwards? And here, the key thing is that you will always have this data, because you know how many features were completed last PI. Otherwise, literally, your system doesn't work at all. So is it 5? 5, cool. How many was it previous PI? 4. Cool. So we know that sort of 4 or 5 is a reasonable amount that we could complete. If you're now asked to deliver 9, next PI, you might say that's an unreasonable request, because our current historical throughput leans towards sort of 4 or 5. And now you're saying, but Carl, size matters. And but if you're looking at it stochastically, the flow, as a stochastic flow, the sizes are not infinite. They're between 0 or 10 weeks, sort of. No, they're not infinitely big. So just looking at the number gives you a lot of information. You could, of course, look at story points here, for example. We're delivering 900 story points, so 1200 is unreasonable. That's a much harder data set to get, because now you need sort of a grasp on the size of a story point and so on across the art. And also, you might be looking for a false position here. My go-to, I would go for just the amount of features completed per PI, look at the throughput data. That would also help me forecast if needed. Now you're an RTE, you have a sort of rough understanding of the sort of what's a reasonable flow time, and you have a reasonable understanding of throughput. Now you're able to answer questions about is this reasonable? Is this unreasonable for forecasting delivery timelines? So you're getting some help here.
Sorry, is it okay to ask something here?
Yeah, sure.
We're making an assumption here that we actually can put something into production within a PI period. So let's think that we are a old company. Let's think we are bank slow.
Bank slow.
Yes, and let's consider the fact that maybe the art is torn between, say, redefining what the feature is because we say that the feature has to go to production, but the feature also has to be within the PI. So my approach has been, let's show that we fail. Let's know that we fail, and let's call it a feature even though it goes over half a year. Is that the approach you would take, or would you split it? So you say, yeah,
I would totally go for that. I would,
okay.
But that means that you have established number one. You know your flow time. You said look half a year. I'm like, great.
Yep.
Because that's reality, right? That's
sure.
The truth. That's what's going on. The key thing, if you're not diligent in first establishing the flow time, that discussion will never happen. People will just say, please work faster. And you're like, well, our flow time is huge, probably because our features are huge. So I would start with just seeing the number and then start there. And that would also mean if you have features of that size, it would mean that your throughput is 0 PI after PI, which would also be a great data point to have.
Yeah.
One.
Except, of course, we're working on 50 different things. But yes, I understand. Okay, good. Then I know we're not going crazy.
You're doing the right thing. The key thing is coming back to the first warning label I had. The metric doesn't tell you what to do. It only tells you that I need to know more. I need to ask better questions here. Why are we unable to complete something in a shorter time horizon? Why do we have such low lead times? The data doesn't tell you. So, good question. Moving on to where I think you might find solutions for that one.
Carl, could I just put in another question as well? What about using business objectives instead of features?
Coming to that in a moment, sir. So,
okay.
You're way ahead of me here, so give me a moment. And the third I would suggest, and I'm coming to the business value there in a moment, is the flow load. And here I'm looking for the amount of ongoing features. Like you said there, we have 50 things ongoing at the same time. I'm looking simply at the amount of features that are currently in flight. I would also go, I want to understand where they are in the process, meaning that how many features are we currently trying to deploy? How many are we currently working on? How many are we currently trying to validate in the hands of our customers, or whatever the state is? And now you have a sense of the amount of queues in the system. You can see the amount of WIP, basically. So these three tell you, they don't tell you what to do. They only tell you the state of things. And the WIP can be used as a first constraint, which I'll show you in a moment. And then I want to go for the flow predictability, as someone mentioned here. I'm looking for the flow's ability to deliver business outcomes. So this really pairs together with the amount of features, which is very output centric, because I want to make sure the output is stable, that it's sort of in a reasonable frame, able to deliver smoothly. That's stabilizing the flow. But is this producing any valuable outcomes? I don't know that. I hope each feature is valuable. They might often be, of course, but in the end, several features might come together to a business outcome somewhere. So I'm also looking for a predictability measure. And here I would use the business value that we use in SAFe, looking at the business outcomes that the teams and business define, the PI objectives, looking at the outcome of those at the end of the PI. Have we been able to close? So that means that we're projecting out every PI, we're projecting out the forecast into the future, looking a few weeks ahead, saying here's a few business outcomes that we think we should be able to produce. And if the system is completely queued up, long lead times, huge features, overburdened with WIP, we won't be able to do that. And then the flow predictability would be very low. So a stable system underneath should be able to produce the predictable outcomes, the business outcomes we're looking for. So that balances now. If you're seeing a low flow predictability, you might want to start tweaking your flow load. Start reducing the amount of ongoing features to get the predictability up, flow time down, and throughput up. So you can then balance these to each other. And now I'm pretty far ahead in my RTE world. I know sort of how to start tweaking the system. The predictability is either good or not where we should be. I'll start tweaking the load together with the teams and engineers out there. Maybe we should pull in less work to get the throughput up, the flow velocity, and get the predictability up and the flow time down. But I might now also introduce flow efficiency. Again, terminology from the flow framework. I'm referencing here actually doing value stream mapping. I'm looking for the times in how long is a feature in a specific state. How long were we actually working on building the code, for example? And how long time did it wait before someone started coding for it? How long did it wait to get to deployed to the car where it's going to work? And how long did it take? So I'm looking for process time versus lead time in each step. Takes a little bit more work, so this is not the first thing I would do. This is sort of, I'm now doing the first 4, I would get here. So the flow efficiency is a radar that allows you to see queuing problems in the system as a whole. You'll see emerging queues, you'll see emerging wait times, and now you can then balance the flow load in those and say, we can't pull in more into deploy because already have a queue, so lead time will increase, predictability will go down. Now you have metrics that would allow you to have much more nuanced discussions and better questions. So these 5 would be my go-to. And good to keep in mind the terminology here, the specific flow time, flow velocity, flow load, flow predictability, flow efficiency, because in the safe and flow framework view, these are new words for lead time, throughput, WIP, process time, lead time, and so on. But I think the packaging from Mick, terminology-wise, is quite smart because there's a thread through the whole thing. And I would actually go top to bottom here. I would start looking for historical flow times, start looking for historical flow velocities. I would start looking for the current flow load and the current flow predictability, and then digging into the flow efficiency. And I wouldn't do all of it the first PI. I would start slowly, but I would go from the top. And a few things. If you have metrics, if you have quantifiable aspects that you're using, you either use them or you lose them. So let them drive decision making. Don't hoard it. If you're not using it, maybe stop being so diligent in measuring it and moving your gaze to where is the actionable things. Common mistake I've seen, we're measuring 60 things, we don't know how to use them, and then we don't know how to act on the data. And another one, this is sort of my sneaker tips, this is my practical little thing. If I'm with an art, I always want to understand how much does a PI cost this organization? And I'm talking kroner or dollars here, I'm talking about the money. I want to understand 10 weeks of works for 200 engineers, sort of salaries, technology, equipment, and I want to know, is it millions or billions? Say that, it's sort of, maybe 10 million. That's what it cost a PI. I'm like, this is good information. Because now when I have a business owner that's lingering with a 60-minute presentation that isn't that valuable, I can actually tell him how many dollars that one cost. And I know that will produce a shorter and more crisp one next time. And if I have...
Oops.
Oh,
I think we lost Carl.
Sure, it was a good point.
Hopefully he'll be back.
Did I disappear?
Yes,
back
you
now.
did.
Am I back now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got a pop-up. My internet connection is unstable. Okay, am I back now? Can you hear me? Great. Then let's continue. So the cost structures of the art. I want to understand the cost per PI. It's a brilliant little piece of number to have in your pocket. And you don't have to have the exacts, because you can now reversely then start calculating, say you're using story points. So we're able to produce 1,000 story points per PI. And this feature is 500 story points. So building this, I'm talking at least 5 million. That's interesting. This can be used for discussions, prioritization. These are not exact numbers, but getting a sense of is it millions or billions would definitely drive decision making on many levels. So that's my practical little, I would always start digging for this number. And whatever you do, don't focus on utilization. Like if you're asking, does everyone have something to do? I'm like, then obviously you're busy. But if you're optimizing for busy people, you get busy people. So in order to optimize for flow, to get the lead time to be low, to get the throughput to have positive delta, and to have the flow predictability be at where you want to be, I can assure you, you're going to have idle hands in your art. or at least people doing improvement work that could be discarded to help out if there's a bottleneck. So if you're focusing on everyone should be fully booked at all times, you're going to see slow flow, you're going to see long lead times, you're going to see low predictability. So I don't want my art to sit idle, of course not, but I don't want it to be my focus. I would never ask, does everyone have something to do? I would ask, are we working on valuable things? Do we have the ability to deliver those in a timely manner and learn from them? And then having the metrics to support that. So that's my little summary on measurements in general and metrics. I'm sorry for introducing a new terminology here with the flow, load, flow, time, and so on. But I think having a homogeneous sort of lingo around it is great. And to be honest, if something ends up in a framework like SAFe, it's going to show up in our world. So it's good to be aware of it and being able to talk about it. So, I have a little bit of time here. I'm wondering, does anyone have any fun questions about these metrics or about metrics and RTEs in general?
Do you think that an art, because I think it's great to talk about the costs, and of course when it comes to business value, is it a part of the, I'm new as an RTE, is it part of the RTE's responsibility to help define what we mean by profit as well, to make a P&L for the art? Like, should we consider us a company or should we not? That's where I'm always torn.
It's a really good question, and I would focus on if I'm the RTE and that was on my shoulders, I would not be sleeping well at night. I would want to be invested in, do we have such an understanding for our art? But everything can't be on my shoulders. Then I'm back to my old program manager role here, where everything depended on me. I would hope to have a business owner really close by who would be P&L responsible for the art, and that could help us also discuss what potential high-value business outcomes do we need. And I would say, cool, I'll team up on creating a flow system that can turn on a dime and deliver those things. But if I'm seeing we don't have even a remote understanding of what potential business outcomes and sort of the internal P&L structure of what we're doing, I would escalate that to my manager and say, please give me help. Because someone should have that understanding. But don't take on everything on your own.
Yep.
I would ask for help with that.
Okay.
But I would want to understand it, and I want to see that we have such a thing. Cool. Anyone else? All crisp. You feel like we're gonna go out. We're gonna start measuring the flow, and then see if we can make things flow even better. Cool. And just a small reminder: don't focus on busy hands and busy people. It's an effect of you doing cool things at the right moment. It's not the thing we should be optimizing for. So it's a constraint, not the goal.